fine for that too. And we'll make sure that anything that we receive in the form of public input on this makes its way not only to obviously the council members who are present, but we will make sure that all of the input gets to all of our council members. We are recording this meeting. Don's got it set up over here so that we can make sure that nobody's relying on my recall or interpretation of anybody's comments. Can be recorded so that we can pass those on and make it available to all of council. Okay, so let's go to the resolution if you want to, and talk about the criteria that are going to shape council's process for redrawing the council districts for the city of Greenville. The requirement of the U.S. Constitution for drawing these representative maps is one person, one vote. So the way that you achieve a balanced electorate is that you have for as many districts as you have, we have 4, then you divide your total population by the number of districts that you have, and that gives you your goal number for each district. So if you look at the population tables, we'll take a little jaunt to the numbers that helps explain what's happened between 2010 and 2020 that got us to where we are. In the first table, you can see that we've got the population from 2010, 2020, and then 2020 by each district in a row, the percent of the population change, and then the last number in the column or in that row shows the number that of people, not registered voters and not anything other than people as counted by the census, need to either be moved into or out of each district to get to that exact goal number. I'll tell you that the law doesn't require that it be precise. Obviously, that would be likely impossible to make it precisely even. So there is a range of deviation. It's generally within 5% either way. Our fine attorneys in Columbia are not going, their recommendation is that it stay within the 10% total deviation, which would be either 5% above the goal number or below. The goal number being, and I don't know if that will be meaningful, but it's kind of stuck in my head, is 17,680. So if you go through and look at what has happened, and nobody here will be surprised to know that Greenville has grown exponentially in the last 10 years in terms of population. And this first table demonstrates exactly where all that growth has happened. And that is in your district, in District 4. So to get to the exact goal number, District 1 would need to add about 1,000 people. District 2 needs to add about 2,100. District 3 to about 2,500. And then District 4 needs to move 5,800 to other districts to even all of those out. Again, there's not a requirement that the numbers be precisely the same, but within an acceptable range so that you're generally accomplishing the one person, one vote. And then the other tables can kind of give you a view into the race and ethnicity changes in the city. So that's just the demographic changes that the city's experienced in the last 10 years. Some of those, we've got 2 different tables that seem to have some of the same information. The Department of Justice recommends these, the third table. And there's just a lot more classifications and options that folks had on the census for how they identify themselves. And so these tables sort of break down as much as we can the demographics of each of the 4 districts. So hopefully those numbers help to illustrate why in January council determined that that the redistricting process needed to happen to ensure that every vote in the city of Greenville carried the same weight and worth. That's the goal of the one person, one vote. Then the Voting Rights Act, which particularly Section 2, which requires that our voting processes not discriminate against any voter because of their race or their color. The probably one of the most discussed criteria is the that the districts be drawn contiguously, which I've tried to simplify in my brain, but I think the easiest way to say is that they should all touch each other. So I'll move over here. So, believe it or not, District 2 here does actually follow the creek, and somebody pointed out. And the Department of Justice back in 2010 agreed that 2 is contiguous. But what would not be contiguous is if you had District 3 up here, which is your district, and you had something way over without touching. So they're to be compact, being like touching each other closely and not hopping over certain populations to get to other populations. That's the meaning of contiguous, which is probably a word that's only used in the context of redistricting. One of the other historical criteria is to minimize the division of voting precincts. A lot of our voting precincts are already divided, so meaning that you have people from District 2, 3, and 4 and some even that vote at the same voting precinct. So our goal here will be not to compound that problem if at all possible, but they are already divided to some extent. And then the 4th criteria is the geographically compact criteria, which again means that you can't skip over certain populations and include pockets here and there. They should be compact and contiguous and touch each other. This is going to be the trickiest piece here, right? One criteria, if you look at number 6, the districts will be drawn with respect to existing districts and communities of interest, as well as to maintain constituent consistency, which means that we hope and what we want is for as few people as possible to have new representatives as we can. Now, you juxtapose that criteria against the numbers that we have to work with, then those seem to be a little bit in conflict, but the goal is to maintain it as much as we practically can, understanding that the whole point of redistricting is to even out the numbers so that there are going to be some people who are no longer in their current representative district, and there will be people who are moved into other districts with other council members. And then the final catch-all that, like any good lawyer would include, is that our map can't knowingly or intentionally violate any other state or federal laws or case law that we know of. So council has committed to following those criteria in the resolution that you have. That's why we're here. The purpose of these meetings, like I said before, is to introduce the process and to start getting feedback from the public for the benefit of our council members, who are the ones who are making these decisions. Ultimately, council will be the ones who develop and vote on and approve through the public process by an ordinance. So it'll be a two readings of an ordinance to approve a newly drawn map. So had a sign-up sheet that we were working on at the beginning. So if I can, I'll ask these folks to bring the sign-up sheet. Okay. Okay. And then, so what we can do is just go ahead and start working through anybody who wants to. If you want to sit in place, we'll try to make sure, we want to make sure that comments are recorded, but I also don't want to force anybody to be a public speaker if they don't want to do that. And then also, I hate to even offer to answer questions because I'm learning this as I'm going along through the process, but I do think that we can probably answer some questions that y'all might have. And then if I'm not able to, we have our able expert on the line too, and I can phone a friend and get you a good answer. And then obviously too, if we can't get an answer to a question, we can always follow up. Yes, sir.
Where are we in the process? Have senators redistricted some?
No, sir. Yes, sir. There are no draft maps. We've had a couple of council members. We have a really fancy computer program that is going to be helpful in creating the new map. And thankfully, really, really smart people in GIS who are Geographical Information Systems Office who maintain all of this information. It's not something that I ever thought about, frankly, before I came to work for the city, how critical it is to have people who are keeping track of where voters live. It's very important, obviously, but we have a whole department that is dedicated to maintaining accurate data for the city. And so we have a computer program that has all of the 2020 census data imported into it. And I'm going to go over to this census block map and talk about them. I'm glad y'all asked about where we are in the process, and I need to talk about the significance of the census blocks. I wish they'd had another name for them, because when I hear block, I think about like a city block, like I live around the block. That's not what it means. It's sort of similar, but that's not what it means in this context. The second map over here to my left shows the current city council districts and census blocks within the districts. Those blocks are created by the census, and that's how they quantify what they count in the census. So, yeah, thank you. So we're. That's right. She went to law school for that. So in changing the district lines, we're not able to dissect or take pieces of these blocks. They look like streets here. We have tried to figure out a way to put them in a visual form that don't look like streets. But these are not streets. These black lines that you see are census blocks. And the entire block has to be moved from one district to another. We can't say, oh, if we just go through, 3rd Avenue in this neighborhood, we'll get just the number we need, and great, we're done. If the next street over is within the census block, you have to take that next street over. And part of the reason for that is that that's the smallest sort of cell of data, census data that we have. So if you start cutting census blocks in half and take a street and not a full block, Ms. Camilla here doesn't know where to tell them to vote, because we don't know where they are. So, but we do know who is in a block. So the blocks have to be moved as a whole. You can see that there's a rhyme or reason that we've been able to tell. For the shape of the blocks, there's no requirement that they have 100 people, or they draw it so that there's no reason for that. You can see that some of them are much larger. Up here in the neighborhoods, they're smaller. I think that what you would find is that the smaller ones are more dense in population, right? There are more people that live in the smaller blocks, but there's no criteria for how the census blocks are drawn. It's just that's the bucket of data that we have. This is the smallest bucket of data. Yeah. Well, it has to be done before the next elections, and so that's why we're doing it when we are. The city has elections, the filing date for which is March 15th of 2023. So the goal is to have it done as far ahead of that as possible, but with the ability to get public input for the council members to take in consideration as much information as they possibly can. But it has to be done before the next city elections, not the next nationwide election or county, or just the next city elections. Yes, sir.
Quick question. How often will residents of the city be updated on the process?
So we have a redistricting website that is up and active now that sort of gives background history, where we are now, saying we're in the public input portion of the process. That'll be updated continuously, and then we'll our communications department will be pushing out when there's a draft map. Let's say that council is able to get to the point where they figure out that they've got a draft map that they're ready to receive public input on, that will be broadcast widely, because that is obviously something that council will continue to want to have input in, because that's a little bit more concrete. And I know we've struggled with that a little bit, is what are we asking for input on right now? Because we don't have a draft. Like, there's nothing for you to look at and say, I like it, I don't like it, or thoughts on it. But we will, once that's in place. Yes, sir.
One question on the mechanics. I'm looking at District 4, and you had mentioned that you don't want to take a portion of the block. If you want to take a portion of the block and it's a contiguous block next to it, that goes. But looking at where we live, Legacy Square, Council Park, and where's the contiguous link there? To be able to transfer, I don't see a link. Or is there a bigger block here that I don't see on here?
Yeah, come show us what.
Sure.
Okay.
It looks like it's sort of got boundaries around it that don't have a link, but I'm not sure if that's a block or not.
This would be a census block.
I would think.
That is, yes, any black outline that you see
All
here
right,
is
so
a
this
census
is the
block.
contiguous part here. That's got it.
Right, and and the contiguous piece is not, I see, I understand the question, right.
I wasn't sure because I was looking at these, I could see a logical census block here, but I didn't see this one.
No, you're, yes, this is that's a massive, right, so the contiguity is around your entire border, your yellow border, that's what you want to be contiguous with. Now, then as sections are moved in and out, or that's, okay, moved out of border,
Right.
so what this would be contiguous, so this would be.
That would be a block.
Well, these are.
And as a consequence. That would be a block.
Well,
This is a single.
We're gonna repeat your question so that our attorney on the
Oh,
phone
sure.
can hear it. That's why we're doing that.
This is a block, but there's actually a tiny sliver
I see it.
of a block right here. That is a census block that could be moved by itself. That one really touches District 3, right?
Yep.
So that little sliver could be moved by itself.
Okay.
Then this one, you see this, I don't know, looks like candy corn without the orange right here, but it is also touching 3 here on the edge.
Yes.
But if you were to move this block here, which touches 2, then it could be contiguous to this one, right? So you could connect it up that way. But
Got it. I
makes
understand.
sense.
I'm just wondering when you penetrate into the relay, that area, how many blocks do you have to have in contiguous?
it would have to be contiguous from here or here down.
Okay.
It'd have to start at the border.
Got it.
You cannot pluck out blocks of
You
them.
can't just, let's say, cherry pick.
Yes, sir.
That's-
And that goes to the compactness too, right?
Yeah.
It's not compact if there's a space between here and here. Or not, and all of these blocks on this list.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Did I hear you right on District 4 that we're gonna lose? We're gonna transfer
Yes, sir.
50-some thousand out?
50, if you, 5,000, 5,800.
I think you said 50.
No, 5,800. I'm sorry. No, that would be district. 5,000, sorry, yeah, 5,800 is the actual literal number to get to that 17,680. Yes, sir. All right.
Follow-up question. For the process you're going through, you've lived in different areas of the United States, and many times the city, our city, they're going to consult entity councils, use their own programs, all for this scenario. You're doing it in-house, staff, GIS group.
That is what our council resolved to do in January. Yes, sir. I think that, and that's a good question. I think that maybe if our council felt like they couldn't come up with a draft and they wanted outside help, I think they probably would have the option to consider that. And we know that there are groups who do that. That, right, we have, you know, we do have outside consultants, they're lawyers, they're not map drawers, but that are helping us make sure that we follow the law in the process, and they've got some good experience with also map drawing too. They've seen a whole lot. And one of the criteria that I kind of breezed over that is important to our council is preserving what we call communities of interest. Our council's best able to identify these communities.
Thank you very much.
If I read the charts correctly, it looks like the population of the city of Greenville is roughly 70,000. How many registered voters in the city of Greenville?
I don't know. It's not the number of registered voters that's considered, it's the, population, it's the total population that's looked at when we did.
I honestly am not sure. Some of our council members, well, I don't know. But the redistricting criteria requires consideration of the total population, which is interesting. Sir. I'm sorry? She might.
I do not have that information in hand,
Yeah.
but that's a good question for me to know next time.
Yeah, we hadn't had an election. scvotes.org might have that.
I would say, for some reason, around 50,000 is coming to my mind, but I would not want to quote anything without knowing for sure.
50,000 on the 70.
Yes, sir.
Is there a block, a block that has 5,800?
Not that I'm aware of. And I honestly, I don't know the blocks well enough, but I would be very, and what Jessica, the question was whether there was a block that had 5,800 people in it. I would be surprised based on what we looked at on the maps. Their population wise are fairly small.
We would be looking at excluding multiple blocks.
Yes, sir. We would be, yes, sir. We would, the question was, would we be looking at moving multiple blocks? And yes, sir. I believe that would be necessary. Yes, sir.
They all be along the border. They all have to be along that border.
They just have to be contiguous and compact. So
Have a line of them.
you could, right, and what you would take them in order, right, from starting from the border, correct?
I'll make sure that I change. Once this is done, it stands till the next census.
You know, we had that question kind of in reverse, but the data that we will have to rely on to tell us whether or not we're apportioned or malapportioned is census data. Not that, because that is the source of reliable population data that we have is census data. So I think the answer to that is yes, is that it would be another 10 years before the districts could be redrawn.
Maybe Billy is the common practice is that council takes evaluation of the political districts every 10 years following the census. But my wondering is, in theory, could a council within a 10-year period of time reevaluate? May not be the question.
But my question is thinking along the lines of the way Greenville is growing and the development of multifamily residences, both downtown, soon to be along Lawrence Road and so forth.
Yes, sir.
We're going to have some population variances that are going to be significant in comparison with like today.
Between now and
We are not going to give the correct variances to them. Same situation. We have, if you look at our 2010 numbers, our 2020 numbers, there are significant differences, like I said. because the only data that we can use to fix it is that census data. We're not gonna do it. So,
Yeah, and we can get clarification, on that from our experts, but yeah, I think the way that would work is this, let's say council's like, we know we're malapportioned, we don't need the census data to tell us that. We're gonna redraw based on, I don't know, wherever we decide to get, the data that tells us that that the city has grown, by 50,000 people prior to the 10 years. And then the map was challenged, then the underlying data supporting the redistricting I don't think that would stand scrutiny, because we rely on the census data is what drives the need. Yes, sir.
One of the criteria you mentioned, community coherence, combinations. Could you elaborate on that, what they're looking for, like, for example, that's the road? Probably defined by the road.
So those are neighborhoods or communities that are identified by the council members, right? So within each council, or within each district, council members know their communities of interest. Yes, sir. And that is, the reason why, that is one of the criteria is if you divide a community of interest, then you weaken the influence of the community of interest, right? So that's part of the reason for the criteria, that it is appropriate for council to try as best they can to keep communities of interest together.
Follow-up question, how is it part of the community? There's individual communities within that large community. If it's a community of interest, is the designation for Hollingsworth Park, or is it for communities within Hollingsworth Park?
Well, I don't confuse like a neighborhood with a community of interest. So there are some, I don't think that, and that is something that would be determined by council members.
Is there a formal definition?
The city has, and I'm losing the name, Ken and Will, the special emphasis neighborhood we have some special emphasis neighborhoods that have defined borders, that you can find, on the city's website, the, special emphasis neighborhood. This is not the same as that. The special emphasis neighborhoods may be a community of interest for the purposes of redistricting, but they're not completely synonymous.
So there's no definition?
There's no,
Judgment.
it is as determined, yes, by, it could be as the neighborhood defines itself, or as, as the council member sees it.
So obviously, District 4 is going to lose 5,800 or
Plus or minus.
give or take.
Yes, sir.
And that is going to have to be on the border District 4 in order to be contiguous with one of the other districts, yes?
Meaning where it has to come from is where it's contiguous with other districts. Right.
Yeah.
So it's a border of District 4 now.
You would not be able to hop across into District 4 without taking what was between the blue border that you see or the pink border that you see.
District 2 and 3.
District 2 and 3, obviously.
Right. And District 1 up above is slightly malapportioned, but not, there's no requirement or specific need for District 1 to change. It may, it doesn't mean that it won't, but that district is not completely out of proportion like the other three are. All right, anybody want to come and take the microphone? You've got a microphone, don't you, for it? Will you tell us your name, too?
All right. We need to go on. Thanks.
going back and forth. Yeah. That's right.
I'm Michael Kilroy. I was directly involved in 2010. And I would just like to make the initial observation that 2010 redistricting was suspect. District 4 started off at 5.5% above the average, whereas District 2 was 6% under. That was a spread of about 12%, which was outside the current DOJ outlines. Also, the lack of continuity in the districts is self-evident. District 2 is spread out all over the place, and a connection by a stream does not, may be technically contiguous, but in no realistic, reasonable view of life could that very southern part of District 2 be considered to be contiguous to the western part of District 2. It just simply is not. The other districts are reasonably contiguous to District 2 is an absolute sore thumb. By operating under the 2021, the elections were held under 2010 data. And I consider, even though those are not contested elections, that they were suspect because there was no attempt to even make a good faith attempt to balance the numbers. Council knew with the receipt of the data could reasonably have expected that District 4 was way overrepresented. District 2 was way underrepresented as far as the population. I'm part of District 4, which is likely going to be sucked into District 2. So I did not have the opportunity, if I had chosen to run against the District 2 councilperson who will continue to represent me for the next, until the 2025 election. And I am of the opinion that that is a suspect way of doing business. The idea of one man, one vote is simply ridiculous, as it has turned out. District 4 started out being almost 6% above the average, and now is 50% larger than any of the other districts. In effect, 3 people in District 4 equal 2 people in any of the other 3 districts. And that is not one man, one vote. That is a gross violation of any concept of fairness. In fact, I think that given the known rates of growth in the city, the District 4, rather than being 6% over the average, we ought to aim for District 4 being 10% under, rather than taking 5,800 people from District 4 and distributing them elsewhere. Maybe we ought to be distributing 7,500 people so that 6, 8, 10 years from now, District 4 will have a reasonable basis to think that it's not being grossly diluted. I would be very disappointed if District 4 ends up with more than 17,700 people. Again, we ought to be aiming for something more like 16,000 people. The other thing that bothers me is that the data that is presented, I know that it's traditional to collect census data on the basis of race, whatever race is. I don't think it's in the federal statute that necessarily define what race is. This is not South Africa with a whole race codification law. And if we are ever going to get beyond racism, we're going to have to stop referring to race. And I would, whoever is in charge of drawing the maps, I would like to see them use data which is race neutral, and that means any mention of race is excluded. again, you can't get beyond race until you stop ignoring race. We've got in the cycle, and this is merely perpetuating that. Another thought is that I would suggest that the map be drawn without input by the 4 district members, because those are the 4 people who are interested in how the sausage is divided. I think it should be the province of the mayor and the 2 at-large council people and their appointees. I'd like to see an independent commission to do this, but I do not think that the people interested in the map should have anything to do with this map. The next observation is this process started by council resolution, January 22. It's now 8 months later. More time has passed than there is before the next elections you have to sign up for in mid-March. We have set ourselves up to do things in a rush. There are no public meetings planned that I know of. After a map is drawn, it'll be presented to council and then the voting starts. There's won't be no series of public meetings or finding out what the public actually thinks about the map. We can talk all we want to about the 2010 map. We can talk about what the 22 population indicates, but we can't really can't talk about the map that's going to be governing us through the 2032 election. And I think that is very, very wrong. Also, unless we get a whole lot of speed into ourselves, we're going to be placed in a position where a couple of disgruntled citizens who are not happy with a map that is malbalanced or doesn't take into appropriate communities of interest. Okay, we get a map. There's a lawsuit. Lawsuits are not resolved quickly. We can better get this process started and finished pretty daggone quickly, so that if there is legal challenge, there will be enough time for the legal challenge to be dealt with. Otherwise, the sign-up time for the city council elections is going to be pushed from March until May or into July, so that whatever judge is handling the matter should be will be able to take a look at it. Right now, it's you get sued, you're not going to be having council signups in March. And excuse me for taking so long, but I just really think that after 8 months to be at this point, we've got to go a lot faster. So we need to do it in a more transparent fashion by people who are not interested in what the result is.
Thank you. Yeah, will you pass the microphone up to these other folks? I will say that council does intend to solicit public input on any draft map when it's developed. We don't know when that might be, so no, there aren't meetings set for that just yet. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I would say that the people in District 4 are absolutely essential to deciding District 4.
Yeah, just one question, the 5,800 increase in population on the map, are there certain pockets in the map, like the explosion of downtown apartments? Is that where most of the 5,800 people are, or?
So the 5,800 figure is the number of people currently in District 4 that need to move out of District 4 to equal that, to reach that goal number, which is total population divided by 4. So the increase in District 4 in numbers is, and I don't do math in my head because I'm a political science major. I've told you that before. So, but District 4 increased in population from 15,374 to 23,480. So that's the amount of growth. Now, what we we do have our super fancy program that we use to look at this data and can redraw the maps, has that information. And we are super close to having a map that'll be on the redistricting website that will let you go in and compare the population in these blocks that we talked about from 2010 to 2020. So you will be able to see. And I'm not going to shock anybody with this information. It's Hollingsworth Park.
Of course.
That is a massive, like if you look at the blocks that are in that area from 2010 and compare it to 2020, that is where the bulk of the population growth is in District 4. It's not.
That's why I asked the question about whether or not that was.
And, so the finer part of that question, I would say, yes, that Hollingsworth Park in general, I would say that's it. I'd put it this way. I think that if you ask most people in Greenville, do you know that neighborhood? They would say, yes, I know that neighborhood. I know what you're talking about, that community. There's nothing that says that includes Braden and not the apartments, but the townhomes are good. That's not defined anywhere, right? But if it's a recognizable neighborhood is what I would say.
Yeah, that answers my question. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Is it possible to contiguously pull Hollingsworth Park out of District 4?
Is it possible? You have to go through, you have to follow the border. So
No, I say it's got to be.
it's pretty it's pretty central there. Is it impossible? No, it's not impossible. But you can't just get to it. You got to go from the border
There's no
through
creek
it.
running to Hollingsworth Park.
I don't. What is that creek called? Laurel Creek back there, maybe? Is that it? No, that one you gotta start at the border. Anybody else want the microphone? I don't care for microphones.
Perhaps you said this already, but through in District 1 and what's your 3, there are more blocks. So does that apply density?
They're not, as far as we can tell, and I will tell you, I do not know a ton about the history of creation of the census blocks. I know that they change, right? So if you try to lay 2010 census block over 2020, they will not match precisely. The census changes them, not drastically. So I don't know. I mean, it would make sense that you wouldn't want to have massive blocks or blocks that had massive amounts of people in them. But, where you might have larger blocks, and District 4 has some of the larger blocks, is what I've seen. If you look at them, and you'll be able to, as soon as I get this map up and going, is there's a lot of commercial. Like you'll have a larger block that has commercial space in it and less residential. But when you're up in North Main, where there's no commercial up in there, then they're smaller.
That seems like a more likely.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
And you'll be able to, you can see that, and it's really great with the map. It has a slider, so you can cut it in the middle, and half will show you 2010, and then you can slide it and click on all the census blocks, and it'll show you how many total population there was in 2010, and then how many in 2020. So you can see not just the general areas, but the specific blocks of how they've grown in population.
I have the definition of census.
Please, come on,
Smallest
give them a microphone.
We actually read it.
Census blocks, the smallest geographical area for which the Bureau of the Census collects and tabulates data are formed by streets, roads, railroads, streams, and other bodies of water, other visible, physical, and cultural features, and the legal boundaries shown on Census Bureau maps. That's all it says.
Right, and so that's why, that explains, and that, I believe that precise definition could be found in the city's redistricting website if you look at it. But that's the reason, that is the reason why we can't split up the blocks, because that's the smallest unit of measurement for the number of people that census generates for us. We don't know how many are in each house. We know how many are in each block. Census block. Ken or William, anything? Ask questions? I said, y'all want to, you want the microphone? I told Ken I was going to invite him up.
Say just one thing.
But just teasing.
I just want to steal just an opportunity to say thanks to everybody for being here. Will Brazington, I know most everybody in the room, but there's a few people who've come in I've yet to introduce myself to. I wasn't sure if we were going to go all the way to the advertised time of 7:30 or not, but I'm going to have to slip out momentarily. My church is celebrating its 75th anniversary. So we're celebrating that together tonight. Unfortunately, on behalf of the city, I'm going to be able to extend a recognition proclamation. But here's what I want to say. Thank you so much for your interest, not only tonight, but in the days and weeks preceding this. And then we've got weeks and months to go before we arrive at what we think is the responsible final map. The commitment that Lee mentioned, that Councilman Gibson and I, with our colleagues share, is that we want and need and are eager to receive your public input tonight and all the days that follow. And as those maps begin to be in draft format, we're going to work diligently to make sure you can see them and respond to them and give continued feedback until we find a place where we feel like the exercise and its underlying purpose is done. I hope everybody has my email address. I think Camilla may have captured your email addresses, maybe? No? Sign in?
Do we get,
We got their names.
okay. If you want to leave an email address.
Well, here's what I simply want to say. If I can follow up on anything for you tonight, along with Lee, Camilla, Ken Gibson, we look forward to doing that. Just let us know. Drop me a line if you got my note. If you don't have my note, my email, it's wbrazington@greenvillesc.gov. But it's good to be with you on Thursday night. Again, thanks so much for being part of this process. Lee?
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Mike, want the mic question, or you want the mic again?
I don't want the mic.
Okay.
Given that 1 out of 4 people in District 4 are going to have to be leaving District 4 to bounce things out, many of them, they either go to District 2 or District 3. I'd love to hear what my possible new councilperson would like to say about District 4, what maybe District 2 issues.
Ken, let me make sure the crowd knows. Ken, this is Ken's. Ken's district is District 3, the pink one. He wore a shirt to correspond.
Exactly, correspond with my district. So I echo what Will said. Thanks for coming out. Your input in this is very valuable, and we will consider all of it. The overwhelming goal that we have is to create some districts which best represent the constituencies that we have, the communities that we have, and allow those communities to best have their voices heard when we are considering council matters. I don't know. I'm here because some of you in this room may end up being in my district. I don't know which ones of you will. I don't know which areas we're talking about moving into District 3. But I wanted to come here and hear exactly what your concerns are, not necessarily tell you what mine are. But if you have specific questions about them, I'm more than willing to answer. But like I said, because of the explosion of population in District 4, we have to do some rebalance. And it just is what it is. Legally, in order to create districts which are legal, which will withstand challenge, we have to do some rebalancing. So, question for us is, as we go through this process, is how do we do that in a way which allows the communities and constituencies which are in District 4 now to still have the uniformity and the power of their voice as we are considering things within the district or within council. And we're gonna have to make we're gonna have to make some tough choices and, you know, we're gonna have to look through these maps and try to figure out which areas of District 4 best coincide with the communities and constituencies of District 3, which districts in or census blocks in District 4 best correlate to the constituencies and communities of William Fleming's district. Because of where District 1 is, and because of the fact that while there are some discrepancies, those discrepancies aren't so great that we have to do a lot of rebalancing in that. I don't know if there's gonna be much difference in District 1, but like I say, unfortunately, there's some people who are gonna have to leave District 4, and we're gonna have to figure out where they go. And if going into it is not something that, you know, I was looking forward to doing, I know it's not something that Will's looking forward to doing. I know he appreciates the district that he had, he appreciates all the constituents, I know he fights for all of them. And the last thing that he will want, I believe, and I think he'll confirm this, is to lose any of it. But like I said, unfortunately, that is the predicament that we find ourselves in because of the way that the city has grown. So with that said, that's why it's important for you guys to come out and try and for us to hear your voices as far as what you want. And to the extent that we can accommodate that, we'll accommodate them. I mean, this is not some process where, you know, we're just asking you guys to come out here just to check a box and then we're just gonna do whatever we want to do. I mean, we are looking and trying to make sure we accommodate the wishes of the citizens of Greenville as best we can as we go through this process. And that's where we are. And that's how we're gonna go forward with this. And I think at the end of the day, while there will be some changes, I think we're gonna end up with maps, district maps, where people feel comfortable ultimately, and we'll be able to adapt, and we'll have great representation consistent with the overwhelming majority of those constituencies and communities that are within it. Okay. But with that said, are there any questions for me? Yes, sir.
Can fill the talent with the boards.
Yes, sir.
I'm not so much concerned about some of the nuances. I'm concerned about the process. Why isn't the city council elected internally without going to a third party? A lot of constituencies that we've lived in, areas where we lived in.
Yes, sir.
There are consultants that do this for a living.
Yes.
And they advise, a lot of times the cities want to be blind to that process. And they go ahead and give it to a consultant to come back with the first straw maps based on statistical models and such like
Yes.
that. It seems like you want to do it all internally, using IT people, your GIS system, and just check or balance or a peer review of it at that level. So I'm just curious why you made that decision.
Well, first of all, I don't think we don't live in a city that is so big where the changes that we're talking about making are going to be so drastic that we need an outside independent agency to come in and tell us what needs to be where. Quite frankly, I know my district better than any consultant that we hire. I know the people who are surrounding my district better than any consultant we hire. I know that Will knows District 4 better than any consultant that we're going to bring in here and tell us, okay, you should put this community here and you should put this community here. So to the extent that we're not going that route, it's because we feel like we are the best people who know this area, who know the people of this area, who know the communities and constituents of this area, and are best able to make those choices and make those decisions. Now, at the end of the day, we're going to come up with a map, and we're going to put that map out for public comment. And if there are people, who feel like that map doesn't reflect what's best for this community, we will certainly listen to those comments as well. But like I say, This is not something where we're talking about just some broad area with huge deviations that we're talking about having to fix, and we can just have someone come in and say, okay, well, you guys have a population of this, we're gonna take your city and we're gonna, make a big X down. We're gonna divide it into 4 quadrants, and these 4 quadrants have 17,000 people. No constituent that comes in from the outside is going to be able to decide or be able to determine what communities are best with other communities than the people on the council and the people in this, is who we have working for us already now. That's why we're doing, that's why I am supportive of doing it that way. Now, I presume that all the other council members feel the same way, but that's why I am supportive of the way we're doing it.
I'll simply add, the other councilman here feels exactly the same. Well said. I echo your response and your comments. But I just want to point out as well, as Lee and Logan have mentioned, we're not going about this without the opportunity to receive professional guidance and consultancy. We do have a team that we've not turned over, say, make us proud, the opportunity to evaluate movement within the 4 political districts, but rather we have a team in place and on the line at our disposal now that can field questions, that can give us benchmark examples, that can talk about lessons learned and experiences seen through other municipalities. So in my view, we want to ensure the ultimate knowledge, as Ken said, control, relationship, connectivity with those that we serve, but be able to still rely upon some sort of professional consultancy. So best of both worlds, as I see it.
Yeah, good. Ma'am.
I'm not sure quite how to say this, but I appreciated Mr. Kilgore's comments.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sitting here listening to this, and we just replaced a 2020 comprehensive plan for the city with a 2040 plan. Because in 2020, we found ourselves in a much different place than we had been 10 or whatever years earlier.
Yes,
We're
ma'am.
using 2010 census data to do redistricting without having an eye to the future, and to do redistricting that will last 10 years makes no sense, because we are growing and developing so fast. We already have since 2010, so you can't just rely on it.
Yes. Well, first off, we're using 2020 census data to do the census this time. But the bigger answer to your question is, we don't have a choice but to do it this way. I mean, we are legally bound to do these numbers consistent with the data that we get from that 2020 census. Now, we can have certain deviations in those numbers, but like I say, we can't say, oh, we think Will's district is gonna bring in another 20,000 people, so we're gonna drop his district all the way down, and we're gonna make numbers of districts that don't match up and go outside the standard deviations. We can't do that. Now, the other part of that is, we don't have to do that. And the good thing about not having to do that is that there are constituencies that are in District 4 and want to remain in District 4, that if we did it that way, we'd be unnecessarily taking them out of that district and taking them out of having Will Brazelton as their representative, or whoever else, they end up representing or elected whenever that election comes back up again. There are a number of people district that they're in and want to stay in the district that they're in. There are a number of people in District 4 who like being in District 4 and who want to stay in District 4. So if we start talking about, okay, well, we're going to try to project out, and we're going to take out more people from this district than we need to. The downside of that is we are taking people who want to stay in that district out and putting them somewhere else unnecessarily. So the best thing for us to do, at least the best thing I think for us to do, is deal with the numbers we have now. And then in 10 years, when we get another census data, we'll have to deal with them again. And that, quite frankly, is the way that it's been happening in the city, the state, the county, the nation for the last, ever since we've been doing census data. I mean, that's just the way it works. It's not, ideally, certainly, maybe if we could do our census every, 2 or 3 years, then yeah, we'd have much better, a much better tracking of numbers. But unfortunately, we don't do it that way. We do it every 10. So we got to deal with what we deal with. Yes, sir.
First, 10 years ago, I respected, but not necessarily agree with the idea of Section 2 of Voting Rights Act regarding the preservation of what was still policy majority minority.
Yes, sir.
And under the, what I see coming up, it's evident to me that that is not going to be possible to, under a 4-district representation, to preserve those majority minority districts.
Yes, sir.
I hope this will be received constructively, but I think the best opportunity to preserve 2 majority minority districts would basically take District 4, split it in half, 4A, 4B, and then, for instance, that some part of, at that point, Districts 1, 2, and 3 would have to lose a little population. And by shedding some population, I think Districts 2 and 3 could buttress the minority representation. Again, it's not something that I love as a concept in a post-racial world.
Yes.
I do recognize the importance of the historically majority minority districts, and I think the best way to preserve it would be to add a council seat and go from there. And I hope that you will introduce this to the discussion, internal discussions of council as the best way to proceeding with this.
Yes.
And I say this in desperately trying to be constructive.
Yes, I understand, and I appreciate that. And we, not something that I personally thought about, but it is certainly something that I will consider.
I mean, for instance, your district right now is at 15,091.
Yes, sir.
If you had 5 districts of about 14,000, your district would shed about 1,000 people. That really would not change the nature of your district all that much.
Yes, sir.
But at the same time, I think that it would go a long way toward restoring District 2 and District 3 as majority minority districts.
Yes. Like I say, it is not something that I've considered, but it's certainly something that I will. Thank you.
Cogitated.
Say again?
Cogitate on it.
I shall. I like it when people use big words. Anything else for me? Before I sit down and turn this back over to the people who know a whole lot more about it. All right, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
All right, I haven't, if anybody else want to just offer any other input, happy to have that, to do that. That's what we're here for.
Just one thing.
Yeah.
Some of us are process people.
Yes, sir.
Is there a description of the exact process you're going through, resources you're using within the city to develop the database and what program you used and how the
It's
data
not-
is configured?
There is not anything that's written down about that, or, I mean, I think, I know Ken knows Carmen could probably talk to you for a couple of hours about how the data is imported, the census data and how it's
Right.
used, but there's nothing that's written down about how that program is built and mapped.
I think
Written
it would
down.
be- I think it would be important to bring more credibility to the process. If you were to lay that out in sort of a stepwise fashion, what city departments were involved, what computer programs they used, that sort of thing, because it sounds a little bit mysterious to me, and I just would like to know more about that process.
For building the,
Yeah, you use
how-
the GIS system, for instance.
Right.
What was the theory behind using the GIS system, and how you put it together and configure it to gather the data by districts?
yeah,
So this is what GIS is. The other thing GIS is, it's a program.
I know exactly what GIS is.
It's a program that allows us to play around with district lines in ways where we can, where if we add a community to a district, we can look at how does that affect the numbers of that district? And as we're looking to try to figure out, you know, what communities go well. It's like, for instance, if we say, let's say we say that there's a community in District 4 that seems to fit well with the interests of and the constituencies that are currently in District 3, and we say, what would it look like if we added that community in District 4 or District 3 to my district? We can, with that program, we can move that area into District 3, and it'll basically tell us, okay, are we at the numbers that we need to get to for these districts to be close enough to one man, one vote that, you know, legally where we need to be. That's all it is. Now, as far as how we're using it, I mean, at this juncture, the only thing we're doing right now is they're bringing us in and they're telling us, okay, this is what the program is. This is what the program can do. At some point, each or all of us will go in and say, okay, these are the communities that I think fit well within my district. And for Will, unfortunately, I mean, this is, you know, I don't know how, you know, this is gonna be difficult for him. I mean, to say, he's gonna figure out, okay, these are the areas of my district that, you know, I could look at possibly losing. And at some point, we're gonna come up with a map based upon, you know, moving those things around that says, okay, this works. These numbers work. We think that these communities work. And that's what it is. It's not any magic to it or any like, you know, we're doing some hocus pocus in the back or anything like that. It's just trying to figure out what communities work, moving those communities in and out, checking the numbers and seeing if those numbers make sense, if those numbers match up to where we need the numbers to be. That's all it is.
You just explained what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
It's really more of a stick and rudder process for you guys.
I'm sorry, say again?
A stick and rudder process. You don't have a proprietary program or anything like that.
Yeah,
It's
there's.
an independence to this.
Oh.
You're basically getting together with your GIS people and say, if I take this particular quadrant and move that, does it balance it out better?
Yes.
It's a judgment call you're using.
Yeah,
I mean, I hate to say it that way.
yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
You get together and you talk, and you say,
Yes.
is the judgment call correct? Well, I don't know if I want to lose these particular streets, so can we make an adjustment there? So it seems to me like it's more of a judgment call. It's not driven by anything more independent than that. It's more of you getting together and collaborating.
It's a judgment call, but I think it's being driven by various factors.
You do have some factors.
Yeah, I think for every,
Balance.
yeah, I mean, like for instance, like I said before, I mean, you know, you're trying to figure out what communities gel with the other communities in various districts. And so it's not, you know, I don't want to, it's not just some willy-nilly thing out there that we're just sort of like, oh, you know, whatever. I mean, that is a factor that we're looking at and trying to make those decisions. And we're trying to figure out, at least, let me back up. I'm saying we, I'm talking about, I can tell you what I'm doing, okay? Because quite frankly, I really haven't had, you know, a full blown out discussion with everybody on how they're approaching this process. But the way I'm approaching this process and the way I think that the other council members are approaching this process is we're trying to figure out, given the numbers that we have, how do we create districts which best work together? Which communities need to be in which district, which communities need to stay in the districts that they're in, which communities can move to other districts? And that's what we're trying to figure out. But the thing that is driving all of this is the numbers. You know, I mean, quite frankly, I think for the most part, if we did not have the difference in numbers, I would imagine the districts would probably stay exactly pretty much the same as they are now. I mean, because I'm certainly comfortable with the constituents that are in my district. I think the constituents in my district are overwhelmingly comfortable being in District 3. I think that the constituencies that are in District 4, I think you guys are overwhelmingly comfortable with being in District 4. So like I say, but for the numbers, we wouldn't be doing a whole lot, but we have the numbers. And because of the explosion of growth that happened over in Hollingsworth, we have to move things around and make it work. But like I say, you know, there's no hocus pocus in it. There's no, you know, like we're going in the back and we're saying, oh, you know, we're gonna, you know, do this magical thing or whatever. I mean, I wish we did have magical things to do. But, you know, like I said, we're gonna try to figure out what communities work best, what districts work best together, what districts get us the numbers where we need to get to, and then that's how this process is gonna work. Is that fair? Am I saying that right?
Yeah, and I think I maybe understand too that your question is about the technical process and like the fact that the city's GIS staff they're using a redistricting software.
Are
And-
they using the redistricting?
Yes, sir.
software?
Yes, sir.
What software?
It's called ESRI Redistricting, ESRI.
I got it.
Yeah, so that is
Before.
Esri redistricting software and there are, and our website, when you go and look at the maps and the tables, references, and I think even, yeah, on this, these tables here references the decennial census, public law 94-171 table, like those are tables and those data reference the specific census source for the numbers.
See, now it gives me information, I understand. You are using the software.
Yes, sir.
To help guide
Yes, sir.
decision making.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And it's, yes, sir. And I let you on that. Y'all would probably didn't even know the name of the software, but their software is Esri
That's true, they
redistricting.
told it to me, but it was like, they want everybody to go. So,
And it-
Got it.
it's
Thank you,
spec-
John. Thank you, so, Councilperson.
It's specifically designed. If you're familiar with it, then it is,
Yes, we got it.
yes. So it lets our technician who is familiar with and she was actually around and for the last redistricting. So but she didn't have this software. It'll let her select a certain area and it'll pop it from one district to another and immediately recalculate the numbers and in real time tell us, is that effective?
It's going to give you a confidence level for each one of those transfers.
It does. And
Confidence factor.
it does. And it also, in the background, is looking at contiguity and compactness and the factors, which is pretty.
That's exactly what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm gathering, the second part of this.
They want to hear you, and I need to make sure that my phone a friend can hear you too if you stump me, which I'm waiting. I mean, it's happened a couple of times. Y'all just don't know it yet. Right.
Just an observation from our council member. Where the process is subjective, it's learnedly subjective. And I agree. I think homegrown solutions are generally best.
Thank you. I really appreciate all of y'all being here. I'm going to grab some of my cards and leave them out here so you've got my contact information, and then you can generate in your mind Ken's email address, Will's, everybody, just from looking at mine with first initial and last name if you need to reach out and want to reach out to anybody with further questions or input. We also, on the redistricting page, have a field for offering input that goes to a centralized location that we will continuously share with council as the comments come in. To date, we've had 4. So my challenge to you all is to at least triple it. Go tell all your friends. This poor girl has only 4 comments on her page. Just go throw her a bone. Throw her a bone. Say something about redistricting. Seriously, tell it. Yeah, and we try to publicize as best we can that availability. We need it. We want it in the process, and it matters. You know, just some things tonight that we talked about that haven't come up in the conversation. So we're really grateful for that and appreciate y'all being here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. That was my political science.
Yes.